morning, and I'd like to turn it over to my awesome colleague, Alex Yen from MIT, to launch part three of this session.
Oh, thanks, Laura. Hello, everyone, whether or not from MIT or Harvard or elsewhere. We're going to launch into part three of this three-part sort of information session. So this section will be discussing the ERC grants. This is the European Research Council grants. And I just want to emphasize again, this is an overview of the grant. So Jackson's going to be walking through what does it mean? What is a European Research Council grant, the types, because there's different types, starting, consolidator, synergy grants, how EURAXESS has resources to help you navigate these. So as we said before, please make sure that you're putting your questions into the Q&A section so that way Jackson can go through those very quickly. If you are, yeah, and I just want to point out also in terms of sort of who typically applies for ERC grants, and Jackson, correct me if I'm wrong, this is after you're done with a PhD or postdoc. You're typically thinking about if you're a faculty member at an institution or you're working with a faculty member at a European or associate EU or associate country institution. This is one of those type of grant venues. So please take it away, Jackson.
Thank you very much, Alex. Great introduction. Despite how much I'll go over and how confidently I'll say it, I don't consider myself the final expert in this, which is why, as I've been saying before, and I really underscored the NCP nature of this, the national contact points in Europe are going to have so much information. They typically will give trainings and talks, but they won't host it independently themselves, which is why it's so nice for me to be sort of in the middle, is a middleman, you could argue, trying to understand what the demand is. So when universities come to me or individual researchers say, "Hey, I'm really excited and passionate about ERC, but these are the questions I have, and I don't think a single email will really close the loop for me." This is the excuse I need to then approach these national contact points and say, "Hey, if you're interested in a North American audience, I really want to put together and do all the heavy lifting for you, and all they have to do is show up." Sometimes we have some time zone difference things to work through because we want to make it very attractive for all of the Americas time zones. So when I find someone willing to sacrifice and delay a dinner in Europe, they're willing to do it, and we make it happen. So I will also point people. Maybe I can work with my friends here to have work on the text of a follow-up email that can go out with the slides. I'm happy to host the recording afterwards as well. And then we hosted two very in-depth sessions on the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship specifically, and then the ERC grants. And these were really well received. Alex, I think you were also a great participant in some of these. So the information here will be 99% accurate and helpful. And then, of course, for the year-to-year changes in the application requirements, just do your due diligence and please check to make sure you understand some small difference that might make a big change to your application. So jumping right in, here is that same old graphic, but just a little bit of a visual layout. So just a reminder that I'm focusing again on pillar one, and then the other major scheme of relevance to people in a global context, the European Research Council, or the ERC grants. So by way of introduction, the ERC is it's within the European Commission, but it is an independent scientific council. So I was very surprised when I first saw the ERC president really arguing for and advocating for more funding for the ERC in a way that I thought, oh, how could you, talk to your own institution that way and say what you have isn't enough? No, it truly drove home this message that they are independent. They also all come from the research realm. So I go here to the Scientific Council itself. There are three overarching domains, and then within that, the specific, let's call them subfields. All of them are sort of experts in their field, and you don't have to worry about them. Maybe like some other schemes that have people from an administrative background. These are all scientists from the various fields. And again, just like I was saying before, with EURAXESS and with MSCA, the social sciences, humanities are an equal and open part of this. So it's always easy to make the pitch to STEM researchers, but I don't want anyone to self-select out, which is why I'll go back a slide here. Look at these last points. No predetermined subject. It's completely bottom up, just like MSCA. There's one scheme that has consortia, but for the most part, these are for you as an individual. If you're willing to go to Europe, this isn't about mobility in both directions. This is about moving to Europe or within Europe to start your lab. And in this case, the only criterion for your application is scientific excellence. So you don't have to convince them that you can take your idea to market and make everyone a lot of money. This is just about high risk, high gain, let's call it, research project. For the MSCA, it's quite similar in nature, but it's three criteria: excellence, efficiency of implementation is also a major factor. There's a few there. But I really want to underscore the fact that, yeah, that you don't have to look at the financial side of things like you might have to in other schemes. So a few sort of fun facts. They've resulted in over a dozen Nobel Prizes. About half of the nationalities of the world have moved to Europe and on these very lucrative grants. I have a lot of slides that I've chosen in the interest of time not to include, but you can see ERC papers with ERC published authors tend to have a much higher um, rate or sort of rank higher. So again, you're in the sort of upper echelon here. So this is the most famous or most important graphic, I'd say. Because proposals are evaluated on the sole criterion of excellence, you don't have to worry about the earlier dynamic I mentioned. And you can see here, it's about 1/5 of the whole budget. So that it's almost 19 billion US dollars or 16 million euro over the course of 7 years. I'm showing here in euro. I'm going to convert to dollars in just a moment, but I want to say under this wider Choose Europe scheme that I mentioned before in the first presentation, previously you could get up to 1 million euro to cover eligible startup costs. So this isn't, rent or buy your apartment or, ship your couch to Europe, but truly start your lab at your new host institution in Europe. Under the banner of Choose Europe, this is now doubled to 2 million. This isn't just an automatic, cash payout to every single person. You have to justify, you have to explain why you need it, but you don't have to worry about, well, I have this great idea, I have my lab right now at my American institution. I don't know that I could start from scratch in a new country, even with this funding. No, you get that additional up to $2 million for that. And then I don't have information to present today, but starting by summer of next year, there will be something called ERC Plus grants. And instead of these, which are all, you can see here, 5, 5, 5, and 6 years. These will be for up to 7 years and 7 million euro. With that said, let's talk about what's already these calls have all closed, but these are quote unquote the current calls for the 2025 period. So let's talk about them. Unlike MSCA, which is really just everyone under the sun that's 0 to 8 years in that eligibility window, you more or less will fall quite clearly into one category or the other. There's also the ability to count against time like parental leave. So if you are 7.5 years post PhD, you might be able to say, well, based on parental leave and then time that I was very sick and I can prove documentation to show this, I consider myself 6 3/4 years post PhD. In that case, great, go for a starting grant. So you'll see here, it goes left to right, top to bottom, starting, consolidator, advanced grants, all mono beneficiary. When we get to this fourth one, synergy grants, this is actually for a consortium, and one out of the group here can be based outside of Europe. So what I mean by this is if you're at Harvard or MIT and you're not ready, you don't want to go to Europe, excellent. Find your team of 1, 2, or 3 fellow principal investigators, and then all apply together as a consortium. You will be the non-Europe based PI. You'll stay put and you'll get that funding. And it's that very generous $11 million over 6 years. You can also see as you sort of progress on what I'll call that ladder, the amount of money goes up and then the amount of time you have to spend on the project goes down. So it starts at halftime, 40%, 30%, and then it stays at 30%. But the idea here is you can maintain dual affiliation. So if Harvard or MIT will let you, you can literally continue to teach classes and spend halftime here and there if both parties will allow it. But there's something called the portability of grants, meaning the grant stays with you. Because this isn't a 1 to 2 year Marie Curie, these are for 5 or 6 years specifically. If you don't like the working conditions, if something's just not working out, you inform the EU, you inform your host institution, you find a new host institution, and then you pick up where you left off and you continue to carry out your project. So that will allow you to negotiate very good working conditions for yourself because they're going to want to keep you the whole time and keep you happy. That's, I think, the general introduction. Again, you have to spend at least half your time in Europe on all of these, but the amount of time on the project goes down. And this last proof of concept grant, I include it for completion purposes, but this is for people who have previously held an ERC grant to allow them to continue to exploit research and carry out more ideas. It's a small sum, but I think for the audience today, it's not relevant. So I've talked about the financial autonomy for this period, the portability of grants, and the fact that you negotiate with your host institution and it's completely bottom up. And then that proof of concept grant at the bottom is what allows you to win additional funding. So some of these slides, as you've gotten used to now, I'm going through quickly, but I want to make sure I leave it in that full PDF for you to access later. If you're in North America, you're in good company. Outside of Europe, these two countries are the highest in just raw numbers in terms of success rates. We've hosted multiple grantees, both current and former, for tips and tricks, again, for sessions. And the very first one we hosted was an American researcher based in Italy. And I asked her, what would you say to yourself back when you're applying, if you could give some advice to someone that's ready, but they haven't opened their application yet, they don't know what to do. And she said, you should contact current grantees that are hopefully doing something sort of in your field or relevant to you. The proposal itself is not the intellectual, it's not bound by some restrictive requirement of the commission. It remains the property of the applicant. So if the applicant so chooses, they are able to share it with you. I've also heard people say, even for unsuccessful applicants, because you get feedback, it can be useful to see an unsuccessful applicant's proposal and learn from their feedback. In general, it's been a very friendly community. I can't say I think you need to go spamming people, but if you introduce yourself and develop rapport, if they're willing, they're able to share their proposal with you, and you might be able to gain some insights from that. Also, you have to have a dissemination plan, so you can just see the projects themselves. I mentioned in the EURAXESS portion how there's that Cordis website. You can find out the name of the projects. People have the ability to keep their name and nationality, for example, private if they so choose, in the spirit of GDPR or individual privacy. But the name of each project and host institution is public, so you can go through and find out, where are Americans and Canadians going, which countries are they going to, which institutions, what are they actually researching, and if you sort of want to use that to start digging and see how you might fit in, you're completely able to. There's a lot of open data and statistics as well that the EU releases in this regard. So here's a simple version of the call calendar. Again, everything. One is open still for next year. Advanced grant, they've opening soon, but for the most part, I would say start your application well in advance. In this case, it's not like MSCA where you'll find necessarily a hosting offer. So please reach out to the institution and propose to them from scratch what you want to do. You also need to indicate with your application what panel is the ERC calls it your research applies to. They basically readjust funding levels so that everyone evens out. So there's no way you can game the system. You can't say, oh, I see last year no one was in, very few people were in PE 11. Therefore, if my subjective research area, if I try to categorize it at that, I'll come out with an advantage. Truly pick the best one. If for whatever reason your research is truly so interdisciplinary that one does not fit better than another, I forget the terminology, but there's a way to indicate this, and the ERC will take multiple into account and essentially assign the best evaluators. But they need to know who to assign because this is completely bottom up and open to all fields. So you can read the definitions or the examples of all of these panels as it was defined last year and find out how to apply. We'll just skip through the graphics here. I think the important thing is that in your own time in the PDF, you'll be able to understand the structure. What's nice is that one of the COVID takeaways was that virtual evaluations or virtual interviews were doable. Previously, you had to go to Europe to be interviewed. So in this case, don't worry about where you're based, how far away you are, or how much it costs to get there. You are able to do an online interview if you make it to that next step. And you get feedback at either stage. So you more or less, unlike a percentage for MSCA, you get an initial A, B, or C category. If you get an A, you then are going to get a second, go to that second round and then eventually get feedback whether you're successful or not. And if you get a B or C in the very first round, you'll get feedback right away and just stop right there. I've seen a small number of examples just to give you an idea for the prestige of this. Someone based in a Canadian received an ERC grant and then was not able to do it because the dual affiliation didn't work out as originally anticipated, and for personal reasons had to go back to Canada. And we were trying to see, is there some way contractually that they can structure it to make it work? And unfortunately, the answer was no. But the takeaway was to say you're an ERC grantee, grant awardee is so prestigious that you can go back not having carried this out, and this will be, at least among those in the know and those with the sort of global R&I orientation or those in Europe, really sort of boost your CV that way. So maybe a silver lining. I just like to sometimes inject some anecdotes, but I'm going to make sure we also get through some time here. I will say, in addition to looking at our most recent webinars, we have two very, very good ones from May and October of this year that I'll share with our hosts to send to you. There's also something that ERC puts together called ERC Classes. It's a YouTube video playlist, quite a straightforward concept here. It's a single URL you can bookmark. You can look through all the videos in your own time, but it's very professionally put together by the ERC executive agency itself with former evaluators, ERC officials, and previous grantees. So learn about the evaluation procedure and let us know your questions afterwards. So this is the information. They're on all the major social media channels as well. You can sign up for the ERC website. And thankfully, in this case, it looks like I have a little more time. So I will defer to my hosts again for previously submitted questions and live questions. So if there's no opposition, I'll jump into the previously submitted questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackson. Yeah, feel free to go through those the Q&As that we have so far. Yeah.
Great. So I will say you don't need to have a permanent position as long as you have for this first bullet point here that is on the screen. You simply say where you're going to be carrying out your project, who your host institution will be, and then when you're successful, you sign your contract with them, and then you get ready for your move to Europe. Someone says, is an interdisciplinary research area combining across fields appropriate? Yes, absolutely. You just have to do a little bit of extra homework of deciding which panel or panels are appropriate for evaluators to come from. But absolutely, the whole purpose of Pillar 1 is for the most part, bold, bottom-up, and largely interdisciplinary ideas. But it's more of a requirement, the interdisciplinary nature in MSCA, but it's not a showstopper or red line at all in either. At what stage of one's career can apply? Hopefully, the earlier slide answered the question. It's basically 2 years post-PhD. However, there is some chatter that in future editions, that 2-year may be lowered to just post-PhD. I don't have anything official to announce, but I would say this is where it's great to keep in touch and sort of keep your ear to the ground about the small changes year to year. There's been so much interest in ERC, and the 2-year difference sometimes can feel, you get a very ambitious person. It's only 1 year post-PhD. Why make them wait a year? So stay tuned, but nothing official to say at the moment. What are the possibilities or opportunities of obtaining funding and certification under the ERC to facilitate participation? I'm not sure about certification or exactly what it's asking, but for funding, of course, the whole point is the grants itself. You have to go to Europe. If you want to stay put, I hope you'll consider that synergy grant with a team of Europeans. However, there is one thing that we didn't have time to get to, and that's called the ERC implementing arrangement. So I would say go to your search engine, type in ERC implementing arrangement. These are essentially bilateral agreements that countries outside of Europe make with the EU to provide funding from both sides to support exchanges. So if you're based in the US or Canada, both of these have implemented arrangements with the EU. There's certain criteria. So for the US, I believe it's NSF. If you're an NSF grantee, you have the ability to join an ERC team for a certain period of time. But then that said, you can also just join an ERC team, not be an applicant, but join an ERC funded research project. Go on the EURAXESS website, on the filters when they're working, click funding source ERC, and then it's just going to say, this is the project. I am in my 2nd year of this 5-year grant, and I need someone who has these skills, et cetera, et cetera. They are not limited to hiring people in their institution or in their country or in Europe. So you can be a Boston area-based researcher and join a ERC team, with the grantee of any nationality that's based in any country in Europe. So it's a nice way to feel support the passion of a bottom-up project, but not be the actual grantee themselves. Someone asks, what's the best way for a Canada, or let's just say non-European-based principal investigator, connect with a suitable host? I would say info days and matchmaking days, or the brokerage events rather, the EU hosted events where they try to really connect people. These will be more popular for Pillar 2, but just stay tuned, see what's coming together. We try at EURAXESS to do what we can, but a lot of our energy is focused more to info sessions like this as opposed to proper matchmaking. But your existing networks, if you have collaborations with Europe, the team there, if not that PI, that co-PI, but their university, they'll have familiarity with all of Horizon Europe, and if some relevant office will. So you don't even need to start with us. Let us be, again, a tool in your toolbox, but just ask them and talk to them. Someone asks about opportunities available to PhD students in Europe while still teaching. Well, hopefully the EURAXESS portal is the quick and easy answer to that. You can start a Marie Curie postdoc. I think that's a black and white one to me. Someone asked, what kind of institutions can host? Any legal entity. So you obviously have to make it has to be relevant. The EU has to understand why the researcher is proposing carrying this out, but it's not limited to academia. So please, if you're in industry, we're usually hosted by universities when we give these talks, but industry is open. And someone asked how frequently scientists get an ERC grant without a journal in these examples. I wouldn't be sure this is even necessarily information that's been gathered, but I would say the best way to sort of get initial sense of this would be to contact an NCP or ERC, a national contact point for these grants in a country, a European country of interest to you, and maybe get a subjective sort of thinking out loud kind of answer on a typical profile. But that said, with these being bottom up, maybe there isn't a single sort of profile you could put is what a typical grantee looks like. There probably isn't one. So with that, I think I will get to the live questions, Alex.
Yeah.
If you want to read or you want to suggest, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to suggest a couple. Like one is a very, I think, sort of like very quick question, which is for the ERC starting grants, does the 2 to 7 years of eligibility criteria count until the application deadline, or is it the start of the project if granted?
It's the application deadline. So the
Perfect.
difference between PhD defense date and the deadline, which for this year was September 10th. So you
Perfect.
know well in advance because you don't know the exact start date until
Yes.
you are notified that you are a winner, and then you sign the contract or the grant agreement with your institution, and then you move to Europe and start. So hopefully,
Excellent.
thankfully, that's an easy one.
Yeah, and then I think the other one that's a bit more straightforward is if you're applying for ERC starting grant, do we need any letter of support from our current institution? Does our current institution need to be aware of or endorse our application?
I'm not aware of this. I don't want to
Yeah.
confidently say no because the idea is you're not being sent by your institution. You're
Yes.
simply starting a new fresh affiliation.
Yeah. This is because it's your own grant that you carry, right? So
Right.
that's okay. Great. I like another one that's actually a really helpful kind of sense of figuring this out for a lot of postdocs. As a European postdoc working in the US, interested in moving back to Europe, what would you suggest, Jackson? Would the ERC be the way to do it, or do I need to apply first to a Marie Curie postdoc grant, or what, or both?
Either. There is something called the MSCA dashboard, which released public. It's been an internal tool for a long time, but I think they've just made it public. If you pop in your favorite search engine, MSCA dashboard, don't let it autocorrect to thinking you're searching college sports or something like that, because sometimes it does. EU
Uh-huh.
MSCA dashboard, and you can filter for certain things. And I've actually found for whatever Italy is very savvy. It working with their universities to promote Marie Curie and then attracting applicants of all backgrounds. But in particular, just as sort of anecdote, a lot of Italians who have done their research career elsewhere in Europe or in the US or around the world will use that as the next step to sort of get back home, so to say. It's one of the bigger graphs, when you're comparing all of the mobility and all of the movement. But I would say it depends more on how the program itself interests you and how you think your career development stage is. I wouldn't say that you don't need by any means a Marie Curie to be eligible for ERC. I hope I haven't implied that at all. The ERC is maybe it has a slightly lower success rate and is longer term. The Marie Curie is only 1 or 2 years. And then if you're going outside of Europe, you have the 1 year return phase to Europe. But the ERC is for the whole 5 years or for the
Yeah.
synergy grant for the 6 years.
Yeah,
So it would more depend on what are you interested in doing and
I agree.
how do you apply?
From the career advising setting, I would think about how much time do you need to actually gain certain skills that you want to learn in order to develop that type of project that you're interested in that might fund an ERC grant in the future that you're interested in. So this is about thinking about a project you want to do rather than funding to go back somewhere. So yeah. So think about, what is actually the most logical next step for you to think about your future career? There's a question about grants for PhD candidates, which is a little bit outside ERC, but are there any professional entrepreneurs with diverse skills eligible for this grant/call? Is it possible to know how EURAXESS North America offers grants or fundings for climate sustainability programs, irrespective of before or after PhD? So essentially, does EURAXESS have any listings of funding that is non, I guess, before or after a PhD?
Yeah, I would say to clarify one aspect, we don't fund anything as EURAXESS. We're simply that central sort of springboard where you're finding institutions
Yes.
are also posting their opportunities in addition to their own websites. So
Exactly.
we're a really great first stop to look at the field and then bookmark a bunch of resources and find out what you want to apply to. When our filters work, they're excellent. If you are before a PhD, I would just say consider either an Erasmus plus master's, including a dual master's where you can spend some of your semesters outside of Europe, or look for a PhD, whether it's funded by the EU or not, including the Doctoral Network's funded PhDs, which are, again, all on the EURAXESS portal. I mean, if you have diverse skill sets, that's great. But for the ERC, no, you have to very clearly have to be in the current scheme 2 years post PhD or more to know which one you fall under. So
And
I
the
would say
MSCA is a
an
postdoc.
MSCA is you have to by the closing date have that have hold that PhD. So, but you can find it. You can, yeah. I think the MSCA might cover some of those bases. But there's a lot out there. Also, look at the national schemes. So they might show up on the EURAXESS portal or not, depending on who's posting them. But individual countries are putting a lot of money out there towards attracting global talent.
Yeah. Laura, you said that you have a question. I'd love for you to ask your question.
Yes, I do have a question. So, there has been a lot of change in the United States. And I, as a career advisor, have seen a lot of interest in amongst students and postdocs wanting to go to Europe. I'm curious if the EU has added additional funding for funding the Marie Curie postdocs and/or for the ERC in response to the increased interest.
Yes, I don't know if it matters to impress people or not, but I can say we did not plant this question, although I have an exact figure off the top of my head. It'll be a while before international applicants can benefit from this, but the European Commission has had a 22.5 million euro call for MSCA. So again, I said before how it's like a wider banner. It's not necessarily a single thing you apply to. So there's MSCA Choose Europe, and that's for European institutions, primarily universities, but any institution to apply, and it's essentially extra funding for positions. So an extra 22.5 million thrown there, but is an international person wanting to go to Europe, you would only start benefiting from this when the successful institutions get notified they have received the funding, and then they can implement those new programs. So for example, I don't think we'll see anything till summer of next year where, oh, boom, it's now on the EURAXESS portal, I can apply to it, because the call is just ending now. But basically in the administrative and academic world, maybe this is the equivalent of rapid change. So yes, there's a lot of money in general, and I'll just underscore the fact that the individual countries are really putting up their own schemes. So one of the people in the chat in the Q&A box asked about that Austrian scheme I specifically mentioned. So for anyone in the audience, if you're on the web version of Zoom, you might not see this, but if you're on the application, you should be able to view all answered questions. And if not, let us know in the chat. Maybe we can tweak the settings. But I did my best to put the URL to that Austrian program in, and you should be able to just click it and learn more. It's the only one I'm aware of that specifically targets the US. But that said, you can be a US-based researcher and avail yourself to all these other programs that are just open to the world. There might be a small number of programs that are available to citizens of that country because it's like a talent return program, but I think that's a small minority of programs. I do want to share in the chat something that people can just open and bookmark for later. This is my little compilation of how to find NCPs in Europe, because I said you can just search, but maybe it's not the first search result everywhere you go. So this links to the Canadian and American NCPs who have their specific limited scope. But then that fourth button there, that blue button, when you click my post that's in the chat right now, it will be the directory of the Horizon Europe NCPs in the European continent. And then from there, you can filter by scheme and reach out to the people that you're specifically interested in. But of course, reach us, North America, EURAXESS.net, and I'll connect you to them if you give me some criteria to go off of.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We had one more quick question, and I know you addressed it in part 2, but this person is just over the 7 years after the PhD, but has had some leaves or breaks. And so can you just address how that person could confirm whether they would be eligible for the starting grant?
Yes, I'd say the two best things to do would be contact an NCP in the country of your choice. They're great on email. Sometimes they'll be able to set up like live Zoom meetings with you, but for the most part, give them a couple business days. Regardless of the country you choose, they'll get back to you in English, or if you speak that language, that language. And then in one of our 2 ERC webinars we recorded this year, this topic specifically came up, and I believe maybe we have one of the supervisors themselves that talked about their reflections on how to, or if it's even worth it to sort of pick between the two. It may have been a past grantee that did it. So I'll do my best if that person emails me to find that link and send them to the timestamped video. But yes, in general, that's something you can do. If it's a proper sort of full-blown reason, like serious long-term sickness, parental leave, things like that, and you're calculating from defense date, not award date, then you would be able to do the starting grant. But just keep in mind the current call closed. So if that's where you are right now, you're going to age out of that 2 to 7 years next year. So we should be thinking, we don't have the date exactly yet, but let's just presume mid-September, early September of next year. But if maybe you're one step ahead of me, and that's what they're asking. So we'll see.
All right, thank you so much. So just to wrap up, I want to, send my great appreciation to Jackson Howard and Daria from EURAXESS. She was not able to join us, but I know she's an amazing resource as well. And Harvard and MIT are both really delighted to have co-hosted this. I hope it's been a great introduction to EURAXESS, to the Marie Curie postdocs, and doctoral network we covered, and the ERC. And there's so many more resources on the EURAXESS website. I hope you will make great use of all that they have to offer. And thank you very much, everybody.